Hello and welcome to Practical Inclusion. I'd like to start today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land I live, work and play on, which is the Wadawurrung people, and pay my respect to their elders past and present, and a huge acknowledgement to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who are watching us today. Sam, whose land do you come on from? Do you come to us from today?
Yeah, so I'm on the land of the Tongarong people. So I'm actually based in Mansfield in northeastern Victoria, also the earthquake epicentre. So I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that I'm on today and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that I am currently on stolen land.
Great. Thanks a lot. And thanks everybody for tuning in again this week. For those of you who are on whatever platform, you can always send us some comments or questions. We're happy to address them as we go along, as always. And even if you're watching the replay, still put your comments and your questions in there and we'll get back to you. And it's fantastic to see the conversations that occur across the different channels. Today's guest is somebody who I have had a number of people recommend that I get on to chat with us. And I see with the promotion that I sent around this post that it got a lot of attention and people are keen to hear what you have to say, Sam. So I don't want to pump you up too much and make you nervous. But I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I'd love us to start like we always do, for you to tell us your story, why your people are recommending you to come on and chat today, and why you've taken some interest and been doing some really strong work and action in the inclusion space.
Thanks, Bree. As to why people are recommending me, I have absolutely no idea. But so, as Bree said, my name is Sam. I use the pronouns she, her, and I am in my early 30s and currently in regional Victoria. And I was born with a condition called achondroplasia, which, as well as being a killer Scrabble word, is actually a form of dwarfism. So I stand at about just under 4 foot tall. So it's yeah, life has had some challenges. It's had some beautiful moments, but it's had some challenges. So my journey from diversity and inclusion, although officially started in the last 18 months or so, as it actually began when I was, very young. And it's funny, in this space that I'm in at the moment, I am drawing on previous experiences that I have had throughout my life. I've always loved sport. My dad's a phys ed teacher, so he always told me to get off my bum and exercise and join in and do whatnot. But sport was never really accessible to me. It was never overly welcoming, and when I was included, it wasn't necessarily age appropriate. So me as a 13-year-old in the 3-year-old swim class isn't appropriate. And so I've been able to draw on experiences such as that and quite a few others where I've gone, okay, I'm acutely aware of the ramifications of exclusion or the ramifications of how people feel if we don't accommodate their needs appropriately. Another example was when I was in grade 4. I only spoke about this the other day actually, and we did bike ed, which was a lot of fun when you're a young primary school child, and we had to bring our bikes in and all of that, and I brought my bike in, and the whole class started laughing, and I was not sure what was going on, but they were laughing at my bike because it was a lot smaller. It just was. So, and what I really drew from that was primary school kids can be really horrible, but B, what a great learning opportunity this was. And my teacher at the time was not equipped to deal with it, and I don't blame her for the how badly it was dealt with. So if we can have those interactions that show that everyone is different, everyone is going to approach things differently, and needs different things to achieve the same outcome. So I think now we're heading down the equality, equity line. So, and then I guess growing up as a teenager, I was a lot smaller. Still am, always will be, and that is what it is. I became more and more, I guess, acutely aware of why aren't different people's voices being heard? Why are different, not so much different perspectives, but different experiences not being considered? And as an example, you look at our federal parliament, it's predominantly white men, it just predominantly is. And that's not a judgment, that's just what it is. And is that representative of our society? No. Another thing, you know, why have I not seen a weather presenter who has a disability, or someone reading out the news doing something really, I won't say mainstream, but really, you know, is really visible, seeing someone who's different. So I think we're all conditioned to believe that we look one way, that we act one way, and we function in a certain sphere, but we don't. So I began studying pretty much the day, you know, COVID lockdown was announced. I'll never forget it, actually. And so I started studying my graduate certificate in disability and inclusion. And it's such a sliding doors moment how these things kind of manifest, because I was going through my junk emails, and being a Deakin alumni, I got this email saying, you know, discounted courses. And I looked at them, and they were primarily, like, there was one on robotics or one on AI or whatnot. I kept scrolling because I've always loved learning, I've always loved studying, and I've always loved, you know, trying to get as much information as I can. And there was grad certificate of disability and inclusion. I thought, oh, that looks fun. So I enrolled, and I applied, enrolled, and whatnot. And to this day, it is the best decision I have ever made. Not that I'm about to, you know, embark on research, or that, you know, I have this knowledge, but it's just made me question everything really critically, question what's going on, why things are, and also being able to look at things from different perspectives. So it's all very well me at the moment, you know, I'm a straight white female who is fully in a full-time job, and I have a roof over my head. That's one perspective. To understand an issue, you actually need to approach it from many perspectives. And as well as, you know, equipping me with a lot of the language to do some of that, and the critical thinking, which is, I think, what I lacked. It has absolutely fundamentally changed the way I view the world, and changed the way that I challenge certain things. So rolling on from there, prior to that, actually, sorry, I'm getting my chronology all mixed up.
No, totally fine.
I applied to become a director on the board of Women with Disabilities Victoria. So, and it was actually on the day that Hannah Clark was killed by her former partner. So, and WDV, or Women with Disabilities Victoria, do have quite a platform on family violence and gender-based violence as well. So I kind of figured, well, that's me to a T. I am a woman. I do identify as a woman, and I do identify as having a disability, which in itself, and maybe if we have another podcast, I can kind of discuss that journey, because it's not something that's ever really sat comfortably with me. However, now I can kind of understand the nuanced aspects of it and kind of be at peace with that. So I joined there, and I was exposed to a wealth of, I guess, advocacy programs, policy, and also exposed to some really average policy as well. So average policy from whether it's other organisations or political perspectives, whatnot, and also just I guess intersectionality. So we're looking at this disadvantage upon disadvantage. So, you know, women currently in Australia are far more likely to die at the hands of a current or former partner, and a woman with disabilities is also far more likely to not only experience that violence, but not be able to access the healthcare required, or not be able to seek help when needed. So we kind of, and that's only a family violence perspective, but I've kind of just taken on this, I guess, crusade, I'm not sure. You know, everyone and those who are not being heard deserve to be heard and deserve to be listened to and deserve to. It's all very well saying, oh, invite them to the table, but that's actually not solving the problem. It's still your table. So
yeah.
Then, and you know, one of the big mistakes of co-design is, you know, when we're designing policy or programs or whatnot, is you bring them in, they spit their 2 words out, and then you wish them goodbye. That's not co-design. That's being a sponge, taking information, and then telling them to go away. So I think if we shift that thinking as well. And I guess I'm about to embark on some research next year, which is pretty exciting. And here we are. So that's my journey in a nutshell. I'm sorry, I got the timing all a bit back to front there, but that's my journey in a nutshell.
No, that's really fascinating. It's so interesting to hear the progression of the different things that have informed and you know, brought you to where you are now. That's really fascinating. I've written down about 20 questions here, so you're right, we could go forever. One of the things, this might sound a bit basic, but kind of stepping right back, and you mentioned that you have a form of dwarfism.
Yep.
Language. People interacting with people who have dwarfism, what is the right language that we should be using?
First and foremost, I'd probably call me Sam. I know that sounds really silly, but first and foremost, address the person by their name.
Great.
It's a funny one because it's quite a personal, well, not personal, but everyone has a slightly different take on it. Me, myself, and this is my own opinion, I cannot stand the word dwarf. Cannot stand it. It makes the hair stick up on the back of my neck. Why? I don't know. Perhaps that's some work I need to do because it is medically correct. However, I cannot get Snow White out of my head. And I feel it makes me a bit of an object. And I don't know if other conditions are similar. People feel similar ways. I'm not too sure. A person with dwarfism, totally fine. Because you're describing me as a person with, it's like me with the really groovy car. Like it's me with dwarfism. In Australia, the term that's widely used is short-statured. Now, I know grammatically that's not quite correct, but it's I think that's probably the term I'm most comfortable with. But if you duck over the Tasman, you'll hear little people, which again I don't like, but that's a term that they've embraced. And over the world, you'll hear dwarf. In the UK, you'll hear restricted growth, which I think is quite which doesn't work for me, but that's okay. I
love the way you've centered that because it's such a common thing that when I'm training people in whatever inclusion, people will often say, oh, I'm always going to get it wrong, but such and such said that I should use this term, and you know, not just talking about people with disability, but talking about gender identities and sexualities and race and a whole bunch of things. And I love the way you've provided that story through your lens. This is what I prefer and what works for me, and I think that's always for me one of the key takeaways is actually understanding how somebody would, as you say, your name's Sam. it's Sam, how people themselves like to be referred to. I
understand also why people are nervous about it. Like, I get it. And, you know, I've had certain instances I was like, oh, you know, how do you refer to someone other than their name? So I get that anxiety. I totally understand it. And, you know, those preferences are mine and they might not be someone else's.
Yeah, beautiful. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about, which is obviously something that's close to my heart, is accessibility and inclusion in sport. And it's something I know that you're quite interested in, and you spoke to some of your experiences. What do you see as, you know, you explained some of the things that you've experienced. What do you see the current challenges you think for including, and I use that word understanding that that's not always the right word to use in this space either. But including people with disability into our, as the term used before, mainstream sporting events, competitions, clubs.
So the challenges or the next steps, or
like what do you see are the key challenges? And if you have some next steps, that would be great. But I think it's good for listeners to hear what are the current challenges and think about that.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really important to be mindful of is make it age appropriate. So as if you're going to go on height, or if you're going to go on, I don't know, weight or ability or whatnot. And again, I haven't played a lot of team sports, so I'm not hugely familiar with this. Just make sure it's age appropriate. Don't put myself, who's the size of a 4-year-old, with the 4-year-olds. That's just dehumanizing, and it's just not right. And if people with disabilities, and let's say, you know, women or certain cohorts that are excluded, maybe step back and think why. So what are we doing that is excluding them, not necessarily realizing it or you know, making a conscious effort to do so. I think it's really important that policies and procedures within sports clubs or within sporting organisations or within whoever are really the language is clear. So the language, and we've spoken about this also, Bree, is clear regarding gender. It's clear regarding race. It's clear regarding disability. So with that language, you're not excluding anyone. I think we are making progress. I think we are, and I think I know a lot of organisations in Victoria have to have a disability action plan, and also are encouraged to have some gender equality work done as well. So I think someone, and I'm trying to think myself, if I were to go and join a hockey club, what would be the barriers and enablers? Firstly, I'd be dreadful at hockey. But secondly, safety would be a consideration. And yeah, I don't know what the answer is. And I don't know what clubs should or shouldn't do other than what I've mentioned before. So it's a Pandora's box. We need to do better. I think we are making progress, and we need to just keep pumping the words all abilities, keep pumping out the everyone's welcome, but actually practice what you preach. Don't just say, everyone's welcome. You know, don't chuck up a flag. Like that's rubbish. That's not going to get anyone anywhere. So really, and also really ensure that your staff, coaches, volunteers, officials, etc., are on board. Because if they're not on board, no one else is going to be on board.
What do you think of? Sorry, my train of thoughts just jumped there. What do you think of? You know, you have a sporting club, and say, obviously, cricket's my example. You've used a good one there, hockey, and the problem is 9 times out of 10 that they don't actually think about this until somebody walks into their club presenting with a disability. And then, to me, the quite common path from there, and it happens the same for gender diverse people who walk into a club, or potentially if you're the first person of colour to walk into the club, it's right then and there that they go, oh, shit.
The AFLW is a great example. So what they've had to do is actually build female change rooms really quickly in these precincts. So AFLW and women in football, or AFL I should say, is a great example because they've gone, okay, all right, toilets, let's go. So it's like, and I heard this great quote from someone at work the other day, you know, we've got to bake it in, not bolt it on. So it's actually got to be right at the beginning of the process. But yeah, like these people shouldn't be an afterthought. And at this point in time, I think they are, which is right.
Yeah, and quite often then the burden and responsibility is on them to say what needs to happen for the club to be inclusive. And I feel in some cases that's okay. Say if somebody like myself who has a diversity and inclusion background walks in, then that's okay for me to help drive that work. But in many circumstances, that actually isn't okay to put that emphasis on. And I guess Yeah. And I get there's a kind of balance here. You were talking about co-design before. And there's this balance that I've talked about with the other guests in many of these shows about hearing people's voices and actually including people in the design of solutions for them, but also not putting that burden on people who are different from the majority of people in that organisation. And it's finding that balance.
Yeah, it's a bit like, it's not my job to make sure the toilets are accessible at the MCG. That's actually not my job. I mean, I go to the bathroom like most people, but it's not my job to ensure that they're fit for purpose for me or anyone else who comes along. So I totally see what you're saying, that burden or that onus should not be on the person or the consumer or however we're going to identify it to ensure that their environment is accessible. A really good example is in the main street in Mansfield here, there is not one ATM I can reach. So, I mean, no one uses cash these days, but that's kind of not the point.
Yeah.
And again, post boxes I can't reach. So again, people like myself who are different, or those in wheelchairs, or those for whatever reason, are again a consequence of design being done, manufactured, whatnot, when that consultation hasn't been undertaken. And if it has, obviously wasn't overly far-reaching.
Yeah, brings us right back to the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago about inclusive design.
Totally. Yep.
So important that we keep highlighting that and focusing there.
Yeah.
The time's escaped me today, but I do want us to talk on, before we go, what you were talking about when it comes to women with disability, and particularly around violence and abuse. And I know it's a difficult topic to discuss, but it came up for me when I actually did some work with women with disabilities, Australia or Victoria, I can't remember which one it was, but I was, it was something that came up in a training session there for me, that it wasn't something that I'd fully grasped or understood, the added danger and challenges for women and people with disability when it comes to gendered violence. Did you want to talk a little bit about the challenges that are there and kind of help us raise the profile and understanding levels?
Yeah, and I must say I'm not an expert on gender-based violence or whatnot. I mean, I've kind of seen the stats and whatnot. But I think what we need to really do in this space is step it back and go, okay, what is the cause of family violence? It's gender inequality. So that's what it is. So, and then, we look at, then from there, we can branch out and go, okay, there's obviously financial abuse, there's medical abuse, which is just makes me sick. And there's all these different things. So the driver of family violence is gender inequality. The driver of violence against women or driver of violence against, I guess, people is gender inequality. So, and it's only once we get our heads around that we can actually begin to understand the symptoms of that. So the symptoms being, I read a great book the other day by Annabelle Crabb. There was actually a quarterly essay about the discrepancies in family leave and paternal, maternal leave, and why it just needs to be parental leave, and why it just needs to be the same for both parents, regardless of what tools they have. And so I think we know the underlying cause, but it's then how do we address that without putting out spot fires? And we know, and again, I'll speak to intersectionality, that we know women with disabilities experience violence at greater rates than those without. Like that is a fact. You cannot dispute that. The reasons for that are a lot more complex than women without disabilities. So we need to understand that a lot of women, who have carers, and the carer is not a partner, often perpetuates the violence. So there's a lot of complexity in that. And then you go, oh, okay, well, what about a domestic violence refuge? Are they accessible? I've heard they're not. So, and then there's people who don't use speech to communicate. How do you then go and make a police statement? So it's so complex, and you start pulling it apart and you just go, oh my gosh, what a mess.
Mm.
And the stats are out. I should have fact-checked this before I came on, but the stats are alarming, as in something like 23% of women with an intellectual disability before the age of 15 experience gender-based violence, and it's just like, why? What is going on? And then to another assignment that I did for uni, it was about forced sterilization, so non-therapeutics, forced sterilization. So that's also a form of gender-based violence against often young girls who have mostly intellectual disabilities, but it's also rearing its ugly head now for people with physical disabilities. So, we say eugenics is dead. So, and that's legal in Australia. That is legal. So it's just everywhere you look, there are just things you go, oh, damn it, oh, damn it, oh. So it's about pulling apart that complexity and looking at it from all these different angles, and again, looking at the power structures at play. So what are these power dynamics that are forcing this situation? And what can we do about those power dynamics? Like Kimberly Crenshaw critiques intersectionality on the basis of it doesn't quite understand the power dynamics at play. And I agree with that, because, we haven't even spoken here about women of colour. We haven't even spoken about our First Nations women. Like, it's just, we'll look at disadvantage upon disadvantage creates, I guess, double disadvantage, and that is really clunky language. But, and we need to understand those intersects to actually be able to inform policy, to be able to inform legislation, if we're going to go that far, to actually have outcomes. Is it going to happen? I don't know. Research that needs to, there's research that, all of that. Is it going to happen? I don't know. And it's also understanding, our ingrained misogyny as well. Maybe not misogyny, that's probably the wrong word, but our ingrained sexism as well.
Yeah.
In a lot of our policies and a lot of our legislation, although it's not overt, it is, if you really interrogate it, it's quite sexist. And I'm not meaning to sound like a crazy feminist or whatnot, but if you really think critically about a lot of the laws that are in place at the moment, a lot of those who are on the back end of it are actually women. A lot of those who don't benefit from it are actually women. And it's not that I'm a man hater. It's not that but if you think critically about things, that's kind of where you'll end up.
That's it. Yeah. Thank you. No, thank you, because that just so thought-provoking, and also just really reminds people of that, of continuing to having to push to that, to understand intersectionality and prioritise it and centre it. And as you say, it's not just one element, it compounds, and we don't always go beyond where we should in this inclusion work. Now, Peter's had some excellent questions there that we don't have time to go to. Sorry, Peter, but I'll just put up this question because Amy O'Shea, who's probably watching us, will be able to answer this. Are there studies around disabilities on women who belong to the LGBTIQA+ community? Absolutely, and we'll tag Amy in that so that...
that question's got Amy all over it.
Make that for sure. Thank you very much, Sam. We didn't get to talk to because I forgot the one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about, which was COVID and the impact that it's having on people with disability, and perhaps our lack of understanding around the impacts that it's having, and a lot of the public discourse and conversations are having. So maybe we can do that at another time, because I think that's really valuable for us to talk about. Thank you for coming on. Where can people find you, Sam? Twitter, I found you. Is that?
Yeah, you found me on Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Facebook.
Beautiful. All right.
Well, yeah.
I think we've tagged you in the post so people will be able to find you through there. Yeah, great. Just before we go, this week it's the Diversity and Inclusion online course that I have. It's really for beginners, people who are starting to get into the diversity and inclusion space. You might have nominated yourself for a D&I committee and haven't done any of this work before and want to get some background knowledge. You can jump on and do this course. It's self-paced, learn at your own time. You'll get enrolled immediately, and it should take about 2 hours, depending on how much you delve into the extra resources that are in there. This week, it's the last week. It's going to be at the introductory price of $47. So at the end of Friday, the price will go up. So if you want to jump on and enroll in that course, as I said, you can do it anytime. Please head to the website. I will stick it up here. So it's breegorman.com.au/e-learning. That's the sales pitch. Thanks, Sam, for coming on today, and I'll see all of you next week with another guest. Thank you.
Thanks so much.